Feel empty? Like something is missing? Fantasia helps the disenchanted become enchanted by inspiring them to become conscious, holistic creators who dance with life. Each week we explore new ideas that expand consciousness, increase love, and enhance magical awareness. Now, here's your host, Laura Giles.
We are in fall, the season of dying and death. And as promised, we're talking about that today with Tracy Reed, who's a death doula, so that we can learn a little bit more about that and hopefully get more comfortable with the idea of dying. So welcome, Tracy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Laura.
Yeah. So what's your story? How did you become interested in becoming a death doula?
Well, I had a good friend reach out to me and actually turned me on to it. She's into green burials, and she's actually a funeral director, a home funeral director, and she turned me on to the doula, uh, the end of life doula, the death midwife. It has several names, and I was really interested in that. I feel like death is something that we need to incorporate into our communities and something we need to be less afraid of. And I want to help people go through that transition. I just feel like it's a very honorable thing to do, to be with someone who is dying and to let them know they're not alone, and just to be by their side.
I think me too, totally. But I don't think that's the mainstream perception. I think a lot of people think that death is scary. It's maybe dirty, disgusting. I don't want to be around that. And we outsource it to professionals. So what made you kind of lean into it and say, nope, I'm going to, get past the fear if there was any and say, I'm going to lean into it and help these people?
Well, it can be all of those things. So, but it also can be other things as well. And I don't want to discount the joy, the family gathering, the communication that the family and the dying person can have, on that last journey. Yes, it can be dirty. Yes, it can be messy. Yes, you can avoid death, and all aspects of like caretaking of the person. You can outsource it to the funeral home and the medical profession. You really don't have to deal with it. But if you can be present and be mindful with that person and their family, it's a really, really loving and connected space. And I just felt like, I want to show up for all aspects of life, not just birth, not just the happy times, not just the joy, not just the excitement. As we get older and we become elders, we have a lot of information to pass down to the younger generations, and they know nothing about death, like nothing.
Yeah.
And the rituals that go along with it, and how it just, I feel like we can celebrate it. That it's a person's life that we're celebrating, their contributions that they've given to the world, in their community. And I just feel like, it, yes, it's all those things that you said, but it's so much more. And I think if we take that back as a community, as a family, I think that there will be closure for the family and for the dying person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who needs closure? We all need closure.
Especially at death.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned,
I was just going to say, and no judgment too. So like
right.
that gives us a space where, yes, we've had tumultuous relationships with these people, but we can put that in a little box and we can put that to the side and we can just show up and be there for them and ourselves in those dying moments.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned elders. Maybe this is my misconception, but I think that it seems to be that women are the ones that gravitate towards being doulas, particularly older women. If that's true, why do you suppose that is true?
I see a lot of men in the profession of ordained minister. So I would imagine, or I would think that, women also have a space and can do work in this area. And that's the field that we were, I wouldn't say allowed to be in, but that is like another way that we can contribute to this process. As far as, older women, the crone, we've lived it. We've watched people die. We've held their hands when we were younger. We watched our elders and our ancestors, pass, or we've heard stories about it. And I think that I don't think it's that men can't be nurturing. I just feel like women, as women, I feel like we have a natural ability to care for others. And I think that just extends into our mature years. And we have a lot of wisdom and knowledge to pass down. I just think it's a natural fit.
Okay. So what does a death doula do exactly?
We do everything. We do everything except for medical, like giving medications or administering shots, but we can do everything. If you can imagine a family friend sitting with the person who is dying, or walking their dog, or fixing them delicious meals, or just watching shows of reruns that they like to watch, just basically being with them. That's what a doula can do. And we also have resources. So when someone is dying, their family is already probably in shock. The last thing they need is to get on Google and start searching for all kinds of resources that can help them. And so I have a list of resources in my community. So it's like a one-stop shop. And I already know and have established relationships with these people. So, not to say that they can't go and get their own massage therapist or healing touch person. It's just that it's really convenient that I'm already in the space, and I can help them in that way.
I hadn't thought about sitting with them and watching TV, but that could be gold for somebody who's lonely and, the family works, they can't be there all day, something like
Hmm.
that. But I also saw, so I'm wondering if there's like niche death doulas, because also saw this ad for this person who specialized in working with young dying people. So they're parents, so maybe
Hmm.
they're in their 30s, 40s, and they have little kids. And
Yes,
it's like, how do I navigate dying when I'm leaving behind little kids? So I imagine there's, maybe there's somebody who specializes in working with the elderly, or a certain type of disease, or a certain condition. Is that true?
that is true. That is
Mm-hmm.
true. And what's something that's really hard too, I can't imagine being a parent and leaving my children behind. I mean, that'd be a really hard pill to swallow. That'd be you'd have to have a lot of forethought in that, and planning, so that when those children get older, they have something tangible or good memories of their mother, not just, or their father, not just of them being ill. Another niche area is pediatric uh,
Oh, yeah.
end of life doula. So when the child actually has a life threatening disease or issue, and the parents helping them through their grief, through that. Um, and normalizing that for the other children that have known this child, throughout their 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, to normalize, okay, this child is dying, your friend is dying, and to have maybe a home funeral so that they can actually see the young one. Um, you know, that's definitely a niche. And I feel like that's one of the hardest ones. If you were to be an end of life doula or a death midwife, that would be really tough.
Love the vibe? Join the tribe. It's free, and the link is in the show notes. See you there.
So I'm guessing that you may have conversations about, you mentioned home funerals. So like what the
Hmm.
options are for, what happens with the body afterwards. I think people need somebody to talk to about that, because I know when I had to do that sort of planning, I I was like, what? The options are just, there's too many and the time is very short. It feels like, I have all these other things to think about, and I got to think about this too. So some planning I think would be really, really helpful.
If you know in advance, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
the more time, the better. Statistically, in the elderly population or mature population, if you've got a terminally ill disease, you have about, the average is about 6 months. So you've got some time to
Hmm.
plan your death and how you want to go out. Um, but yes, there are, home funerals, and um, there are lots of options. So that's one of the resources that we have in our back pocket as well, is a list for those items.
So, what type of people hire a death doula?
Gosh, I mean, anyone. It's anyone, and it depends on the doula too, because it depends on what the services they offer. So, I mean, anyone
Ah,
really can hire a death doula.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's the difference between a death doula and a hospice worker or a death midwife?
So hospice workers, they do medical. So they come in and they'll do intakes for the patient or the client. They'll take their blood pressure. They'll administer medications. They're trained in the more medical and physiological aspects of dying. They are trained also in some of the emotional and spiritual things, but from my experience, they really focus on the medical. So that's the main difference between a death doula and a hospice worker.
Yeah, I think because
As
a lot of people, if they're saying, "Well, we already have hospice, what do we need a death doula for?"
I think they would actually answer their own question, because hospice only comes maybe 30 minutes, possibly to an hour. And I don't, how many
Ah,
times a week they come. It's not as frequent as some families would like. They're looking for someone, 9 times out of 10, they're looking for someone to sit with, the dying person, or even with them, to help them
mm,
declutter some of the person's belongings. What do I do with this? What's my next step? Um, so hospice doesn't necessarily do all of that. They just don't have the time. They've got way too many patients to spend that kind of time with them.
okay. So it sounds like because hospice is medical, that this might be something that their insurance pays for. So does insurance pay for a doula?
It depends. So yeah,
Oh,
you have to
really?
research. Yeah, you have to research your program.
Hmm.
It is possible, depending on the services that the doula provides. It is entirely possible. Yes.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
So is this a regulated profession, or can I just sign up and be like, "Hey, I'm a doula over here, hire me"?
No, we're not federally regulated or state regulated, or depends on your locale. But no, we're not regulated, but we do go through training, and we do get national certifications, and on our own, we do take continuing education. In my opinion, this is a lifelong profession. You don't get
Mm,
into this profession lightly. And if you don't know your stuff, and you don't have the capacity for the empathy for the client and the family, you're not going to do well in this profession.
mm.
So
Do
it's
doulas help with medically assisted suicide?
that's a good question. I've thought about this, because secondhand knowledge. I know of a couple that did this in West Virginia, and um, I I don't know to answer your question. I don't know. I haven't had any firsthand experience with
Mm.
it,
Well,
but that
it
is a
seems, based on what you've said, it seems like there wouldn't be any reason why they couldn't. It would just be a personal choice.
yeah. So we meet people where they are, and if that's where they want to be, then we can be with them um,
Okay.
through that process. Yeah,
So what
we focus on like non-judgment. So however you want to exit this you know physical realm, we support that.
okay. So would it be part of your job description to be with a person when they die?
Yes. Yes, that's
Ah.
part of my job description. That
Uh-huh.
might not be part of someone else's, but that's part of mine. And I include that in our client agreement, and the family or the dying person will select or not select that service.
Ah. Okay. What's the most difficult part of the job for you?
Oh gosh, not taking it home with me. So
Uh,
after leaving the client, and this is even when they are um, still in, good spirits and they're not actively dying. I think actively dying is when, when their breathing changes. They're most of the time not, they're unconscious.
mm,
It's what we all typically think of as dying. Like to me, I recognize that as dying. There's no coming back from that. But when I'm with a person who is long term dealing with something that takes many months or even possibly a year to get to active dying, and I come home and I'm trying to process, that they're slowly declining, health wise and motor skill wise towards death, that's hard for me to deal with because our instinct as humans is to survive.
yeah.
And we just push, push,
Hmm.
push to stay alive. We take all these medications, we do all these physical remedies, to try to stay alive, healthy, and fit. And when you look at somebody who is slowly declining, it's hard not to like turn on that switch, that survival switch. But that's not where they are. And to reconcile that internally, I think that's one of the hardest things we have to do.
So I guess you would never be with somebody who's in denial of dying because they have to
Oh,
recognize that they are dying, right?
so no, I would have to say no. There are people that, in my opinion, seemingly they are diagnosed with a terminally ill condition, but they refuse to accept that they are going to die from it. That's tough too, because again, I have to meet them where they are. So if they
Hmm.
think they're going to live, I have to support that. I cannot come in there when I walk through that door and be, oh, woe is you, and do you want to memorialize, any of these memories that you have, or where do you want to give, this particular vase to? Who do you want to give it to? There's none of that. It's really just focused on day by day and keeping them as cognizant and pain free as possible so that they can heal themselves because that's what they want.
Well, there is, what do they call it? Spontaneous healing, or I'm not really sure what the term is. I mean, I don't think, honestly, that just because somebody says you're terminally ill doesn't mean that you're going to die, because I have seen lots and lots of miracles. So let's say that it's me, okay? And I have this horrible disease that people die from.
Hmm.
And I'm like, nope, I'm gonna turn this around. I got these natural remedies. I have people praying for me, or whatever my strategy is, or I'm gonna believe that God's gonna turn it around. But I still have you. Is that a possibility?
Yes, I believe it too. Your belief is
Okay.
my belief. If that's what
No,
you believe,
I mean,
yeah,
is it a possibility that I could be in that frame of mind and still have a death doula?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, absolutely, yes, yes, because you know, um, yes, absolutely, yeah. If I
Yeah.
were, if I was, I'm trying to think, because I'm going through some of these protocols that I go through. There would be a lot of things that I wouldn't do,
Uh-huh.
but um, I would be available if you had any questions about anything. But absolutely, yeah, I would be your companion because sometimes physically, while you're healing, you still need support.
Right. Yeah.
And, sometimes you don't feel like getting out of your chair to go cook, a really fresh meal or prepare it. I could do that for you. I could help you
Oh,
on your healing journey. So
okay.
yeah,
So it's not necessarily just a death I'm going to die doula, but it could be I'm really sick doula.
it could be. Yes,
Okay.
it definitely could be. Yes.
Okay. So what's the most rewarding part?
Let's see. The most rewarding part is when they feel their emotions and they're able to process some things that they've been holding on to for so very long. And they're able to let that go. And the forgiveness part is amazing to watch and to be present with them when they have that moment. It doesn't always happen, but when it does, I feel like that's the most rewarding.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of dying, and I hope for the dying person's sake that they do too. I think it's, as we're dying, it is the end of life, and it's like, how do you want to go out? I don't want to go out with a bunch of unspoken things and unresolved feelings. I want to let that go. So I would think that having somebody to witness that or to help with that would be invaluable.
Yes. And a lot of times, a lot of times I'm a stranger to these people. So people feel more comfortable talking to a stranger and like
That's true.
spilling their beans. So, so if I could just witness and then just take it with me and they take it with them, they feel like, so much is lifted emotionally.
So if somebody is listening to this and be like, "Oh my gosh, I think I want to do that," what would you have liked to have known before you got started? So what should they know?
They should know that this is not a short-term endeavor, that we are all capable of doing this type of work. You have valuable talents that, someone would need in their final journey. The fact that they're actually researching or like, oh, this might be for me, that's a sign to say, like, take a step further and research end of life doulas, death doulas. Another piece of advice would be that there are best practices though in this profession. So it would be very wise to go get a certification that teaches those best practices so that you can be recognized and so that you're doing the right things and you know what to do, what not to do. And I think that you're always going to go back to, if you do decide to get certified, you're going to go back to that material because it's a lot of information and it takes a while to absorb all of it. And sometimes it doesn't get concrete until you actually have firsthand experience. I mean, you can learn all day long, but unless you've got, something that you've done, sometimes it doesn't solidify. So I would say don't be discouraged. It's a much needed profession. But there are some best practices that I think that would be beneficial for you to learn up front.
Okay. And on the flip side, if somebody's looking for a death doula, is there certain things that they should make sure that their person has, or like things that they should make sure they don't have?
Sure. So if you're looking for someone to spend time with your family, you want to be able to trust them. So that's first and foremost. So you have an initial meeting and you would interview people to see if they are compatible with you and your family. To see if they offer things that you would need assistance with or your family needs assistance with. So there's the matching of the doula and the family or the person. If I were looking for someone, I would definitely look for someone who has an accreditation or has been doing this for a while and has referrals. And someone who's local is helpful so that, the person isn't traveling for hours, to be with you.
Is there some, I'm putting myself in those shoes and, I might be like, oh God, I don't even know what I need. Is there some sort of checklist that makes this easier so here's how it kind of looks in my mind. Okay. I have somebody in my family or it has this new diagnosis. I need some help. I'm overwhelmed. I know that I'm going to need help with XYZ, but then, there's probably a ton of things I haven't thought about. So do I just add that on as I go? Or is there a checklist that helps make it easier on the front end?
So I'm not aware of any checklists. I mean, there's always Google. Like I said, the more time that you have, the better. For all, if you're looking for like a time window and like a list of things to do within kind of like a wedding, like planning a wedding
Yeah.
versus planning a death, right? So you're looking for death planning essentially. You can Google that information, or like I say, death typically happens if somebody is diagnosed and they've got, let's say their medical professional says they have like 3 months, to live. I'll just do like maybe a summary. The first thing you want to do is get your advanced care planning in place. if you have enough time. A lot of times people don't have that kind of time. They are going into active dying within,
Mm,
like a few weeks. So like advanced care planning is do not resuscitate
hmm.
if since I have a terminal illness, I do not want to be resuscitated by medical professionals, things like that. Your will, what are you going to do with your belongings after you pass? So, I mean, to be brief, I have a list, when they contact me and I can give them that, like, free of charge. These are the things that need to get done. But other than that, I'd say Google would be your best bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people need to have these conversations about do not resuscitate and what does that mean? The will, where is it? I think this needs to be done like today. If this is not done yet, this needs to be done today because you don't
Yes.
know. I could be hit by a car and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm not
And
able to
that's,
tell anybody.
I mean, that's a really good point. I think life happens so fast, and sometimes death is that way too.
Mm-hmm.
And since we are already in the avoidance and the survival mode, we turn a blind eye, to death and dying. It doesn't help matters either. It distracts us really. But I think it needs to be more commonplace, like you said, a conversation.
Yeah.
I just had a thought. There's the National End of Life Doula Alliance, NEDA, NEDA, the NEDAalliance.org. People can go to that, and that has a lot of helpful information on where to get started if you know of somebody who is passing within
Okay.
6 months. Yes.
Yeah. And
And
back to
it'll
the
help you find somebody too.
Oh, okay.
Anybody,
Cool.
if anybody's certified in your area, it'll help the family or the client find someone.
Well, back to the do not resuscitate thing.
Hmm.
I think too, that's a decision that needs to be made when you're not under threat because you may be too emotional at that point. And if you leave it to the family, they're just, it's so hard to say, okay, I'm going to be the one to make the decision to pull the plug. I don't want anybody to have that pressure.
So you can have it in writing. The family may or may not go along with it, even though it is in writing. So you really need to advocate either for yourself or have someone else like the doula say this is what they want.
Yeah.
Um, and it takes the pressure, off of the family because the dying person and like you said, they need to be in their right mind. The dying person, these are their wishes. But a lot of times the family is so emotionally still present with their family member and they don't want them to die that they don't honor their dying
Yeah.
wishes.
Yeah.
So that does happen more often than not. So that's another benefit of having a third party in there like a doula saying,
Right.
okay, this is what they want.
Yeah. Well, and also I think it helps to be educated about what resuscitate means and what
Hmm.
that process looks like on the body. I mean, all of these things are like autopsy, all of the nobody wants to have that conversation, but I think people need to know because if you knew, it may change the way that you decide.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So in elderly people, I mean, they get cracked ribs after they get CPR done to them, and that complicates their health issues even more.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. So, what do you think has happened in our society to make death doulas a necessity? Because 100 years ago, this did not exist, not as a profession.
I think as a species, we are starting to look inward and try to understand some of the traumas that we've experienced as individuals and as a species. And one of those is avoidance. And the precursor to all of this is, we were embalming men from the Civil War era, so that their families could see them and say goodbye. And it's gotten so expensive to have a casket and a funeral home and services and just all of the final journey for that particular person has gotten so expensive. I think finances is a major part of it. How can we save money? Another part is the people themselves that are dying. They don't want all of that.
Mm.
They're asking for I want to be at home. And that's not a new thing. It's like 50% of people, they die at home, and that is a choice. Like, they do not want to be in the hospital. They want to be at home surrounded by their loved ones. They want to be pain free. That's, I'm not saying that's everybody's death plan, but like, from what I've been around, that's what they tell me. And I think finances and simplifying things and trying to resolve some of those inner conflicts play a big role in having death doulas.
I know that death doulas are not medical professionals, but I would love to get your take on dying while drugged. Now, I know in the 20s they had some kind of thing called, I don't even know what it was called, but you would be knocked out when you were having a baby. And I think they did this all the way up to the 60s at twilight sleep. That's what it's called.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think being drugged while being birthed and being drugged while dying, while it may be comfortable, I don't think that's a good thing for the soul. And it's totally hypothetical. Who knows? I'd love to get your take on that.
So again, I come from the stance of I don't want anybody to be in pain when they're dying. They've lived their life. They've been in a lot of pain during life. At death, it's really up to them. I hear what you're saying as far as being present in the moment and what dying can be. I personally don't believe that they should be drugged to the point where they're out of it, but I would be okay with someone who is not experiencing pain when they cross that threshold. But I would love for them to be cognizant and aware. But the natural body process of that, the physiological process, is they check out. You don't think that they do, but they check out way before you know that they're gone.
So what does it mean? Yeah. What does it mean to have a good death?
Oh, that's up to the individual. It's different for everyone.
What does it mean for you?
Oh, I definitely want a living memorial. Before I die, if I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness and I've still got my wherewithal, a good death for me would be to have a wedding reception. Have as many family and friends, potluck, dancing, music. I'm just leaving my physical body, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be here. I just won't have a container or a physical part to me, but my soul is still there. And I don't want to be alone. I mean, and I definitely don't want to be in pain. That would be a good death for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tracy, for sharing your journey as a death doula, and I appreciate you so much.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate you too. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, why not show your love with a review? Thanks. See you next week.